One of my picks would actually be Wigton Wind Farm. So I've probably spoken about this on other forums and stuff, but I think even, was it Simon spoke about it at your last Stocks to Watch? If you look at Wigton, they are in an interesting position now because, everyone knows probably about greenhouse gases, global warming, and stuff like that. There's essentially a global push to try to reduce the amount of carbon emissions or reduce, global warming. And so Jamaica, along with other countries and other companies, we are all trying to increase our usage of renewable energy or reduce our usage of fossil fuels. And so you're seeing it like Jamaican government, for example, has a goal. I don't know if we'll hit it. I don't think we will, but it's always good to try. We're trying to increase our percentage of energy that comes from renewable energy. So right now, I think it's like 10%. And we are hoping to get to 50%. But at the same time, we're also trying to increase the amount of energy we have too. So you're going to get an increased amount of energy Jamaica needs, and you're also going to get increased percentage of it, or trying to get an increased percentage of it being renewable energy. So there are, and another thing too is that a lot of financing is going towards renewable energy because we all are. It's like we're all live on Earth. We're all going to need this. So I think Wigton is not gonna have an issue financing a lot of the projects. I see the government now, government and JPS, they've essentially put out bids. So on the government side, that's the generation procurement entity, or the GPE. They're asked initially for 100 megawatts. An article came out this morning or last night that actually says that they received, I think, 12 bids from 11 different suppliers, and Wigton has said that they are one of the bidders. And it'll be interesting to see how many people actually end up winning that, getting a slice of that pie. I think what they've said is that the minimum someone can get is 5 megawatts.
But the fact that there are so many people bidding, Matthew, doesn't that bode?
Hold on, I'm not done. That's one bid, Jermaine. That's one bid. So the 100 megawatt.
Just one little fact there. No one entity can actually garner more than half of the actual bid.
So I think the minimum they say is 5 megawatts, but the max is 50 megawatts. So I don't know how they're going to split it up. That's one project. The JPS has also asked for more energy too. They're asking for 300 megawatts. Part of it is going to be solar, part of it wind, part of it just battery storage. And then even in the GPE says that they're going to be going through, these different bids that were received. And then they're planning actually later this year to ask for another supply of energy. I think it's 165 megawatts. So I think that it's going to, it's not just Jamaica doing this. There are going to be other countries in the Caribbean that are going to want this. So I think if I don't know for sure, they may not get this 100 megawatt. They may not even get the 300 megawatt. But I think that essentially there's going to be a lot of opportunities, I think, for them to build out one of these projects, which I think, and if you think about the Wigton right now, I think it's like 60 megawatts. So them getting a contract of 50 megawatts or 100 megawatts is a big jump in their revenue. So
yeah, I was going to ask you to put that into context because persons may not understand what that project may mean for them in terms of revenue.
Mm-hmm. So right now, I think they have produced like 60 or so megawatts. The other thing too is that remember that they don't just have to depend on the government of Jamaica or other governments asking for it. They are now, I think what they've realized is that they shouldn't, essentially they listed 5 years ago, and they were trying to wait on, the government to put out bids, but the government wasn't putting out bids. And they were kind of just sitting on a lot of cash, not really doing much. And I think what they've now, probably over the last year and a half, if you've noticed, they've been doing other projects. So they, for example, the airports, they're like, okay, let's build a solar farm for you guys. There's a farm in it, St. Elizabeth, the Essex Valley. They're like, okay, let's build out a solar project for you guys. So it's not just, okay, I have to wait for the government. There are companies, and look at it, Jamaica has very high electricity costs. We have some of the highest electricity costs in the world. Right? So there's a lot of people who want to reduce that electricity bill. They don't want to pay JPS anymore. And so you'll have companies like Wigton and other companies, even Tropical Battery, for example, they can benefit from this because companies will say, okay, I want to reduce my bill. How can I do this? You even look at it that, for example, the government is providing incentives I think NHT is now offering a loan of, I think it's 1.5 million at 5% if you want to set up like solar, I think a solar system or like solar water heaters and things like that. So essentially, what I'd say too,
some new things, and it seems to favor those type of companies. But
another thing too, the government reduced the corporate income tax companies like Wigton would have to pay. So Wigton before had to pay like 33% or a third of their corporate income, a third of their income was paid out to corporate income tax. They're reducing that to 25%. So that's also a big incentive. And the thing is, I don't think the incentives will stop there. So even though this year, these are some of the incentives that we got, I think that if you look at it as we go down, we all realize, wait, the world is getting hotter. There's going to be a rush at some point to say, hey, we've been doing this, we've been destroying the atmosphere, destroying the world. We kind of have to get serious about this. So I'm trying to get ahead of people like that. So that's why you can look at something like that to watch that company.
So my only concern with them, and before you guys chime in, is just I do think that there's gonna be a lot more competition in that space. That's my only concern. You see, if they had somewhat of a either guaranteed contracts or guaranteed partnerships where they didn't necessarily have to be bidding for everything. Because to me, I've been on the side of bidding for government projects. Right? There's no guarantee. The process is lengthy one, so it takes resources. Sometimes it can take months to prepare for a bid. You go through this process, you submit that bid, and then you have to wait months again for that to be confirmed if you're selected. Once that's confirmed, then you take months again to actually see the revenue, because it takes months now to deliver on the project, and you get paid in parts. So if they do win that bid, for example, they may not even see that revenues in this financial year, maybe next year. But some of the things you mentioned, I'm thinking it may favor more energy than Wigton necessarily. But we'll get there. David, you're going to say something?
So to just give some clarification on something. So Matthew, so what happened last year was that Wigton, along with a couple of the other energy providers or IPPs, would have reached the tax administration Jamaica. TAJ was saying 30%, but Dr. Clark said that no, we don't want these guys to pay 30%. So if you go back to Wigton's prior financial years, meaning after their debits from the government, they're paying 25% income tax. It was only the most recent tax assessment where that kind of, I should say, divergence came up. And Wigton, would have accounted for 30% at year-end in March 2023, but Dr. Clark is saying, nah, we're not into that. So it's just really harmonizing it back to the 25% rate in effect. So it's going to pay 30% for 1 year, and it's harmonized again, right? So it's still a good incentive. So that's one positive. Two, what remember something, Jermaine? In the case of Wigton, they're in what you'd call a much more unique position. So remember, the way Wigton works is that they charge per kilowatt in US dollars, right? And they sell this energy they produce to JPS, because they're the ones who have the distribution network to actually supply that energy where it needs to go. So once JPS continues to kick and breathe, and we need to electricity every day, Wigton is not necessarily worried about actually getting paid their money. Because at the end of the day, once that new capacity comes on stream, Wigton only has one buyer to actually get it to actually sell it to, which is JPS. And as energy is produced, it's consumed. And it's not like Wigton has to wait in months upon months to actually get that payment. JPS is going to pay them expeditiously. I'm not sure what time it is, but it's not likely going to be under government contract terms. Yeah. So there are two parts of the equation in the sense that they're bidding JPS in US dollars, it's paid in Jamaican dollars. So when the FA rate is stable, Wigton's revenues are relatively stable, barring anything else in terms of higher wind availability or anything else to that effect. But where there is a depreciation of the Jamaican dollar, Wigton actually earns more. So in effect, by the nature of how the business is, they can earn more just if the dollar depreciates in context, when the Jamaican dollar to US dollar. So those are just two little key things to put into perspective. And I get the concern that persons have, which is relatively right in the sense that Wigton, when they're building up all this cash, but at the same time, because they built up all this cash, it does give them some leverage in terms of not just bidding on these projects, but also potentially exploring other opportunities. They'd have taken a stake in the startup Flash Motors, and they would have also, looked to work on some of these joint venture projects with innovative energy company, not necessarily the listed JC company, but a private company that is associated with the former Siboney. But basically, they have the capital they can put to work. And the reality is, as Matthew pointed out, once Wigton does actually get to add that additional revenue onto their systems, it's literally just for them to maintain the systems for the most part, and they're fine. The only constraint they do face at the moment is really land and positioning, because the former managing director, which should be Erlington Barrett, pointed out that some of the best places for Wigton to generate wind are in places that are, for example, forest reserves that the government will not allow Wigton to this encroach on. So there are different factors that inhibit Wigton's expansion domestically, for example, in terms of wind. But on the flip side, they're not in a position where they have to be struggling to collect revenue from whoever they sell energy to. It's just one buyer.
All right.
And my only final point is that I'm just watching carefully to see how Wigton changes over the coming months with the expiration of the share cap. And the reason I make that point is because Wigton would have been focused on Jamaica for all of these years, within the government to bring on stream the new procurement of energy, RFP, right? You would have seen MPC, source capital across the region and deploy it into DOMREP, El Salvador, Costa Rica, Dominican Republic, through different joint venture partnerships like with Ansa Macal. So if it's an engineering so strong cash flow and you're able to actually take on some of these deals or business relationships through, a potential new large shareholder, then it goes well for everybody. Because I think that's one of the countries Wigton faces right now, in the sense that because there's no central control to anything of a shareholder, and that kind of preference towards Jamaica, they're not fully leveraging the potential that exists in other markets, because I know for a fact that once the US dollar is still green and their government or whichever entities buy energy from those IPPs is still paying for it, everybody wins. So
Okay. So I mean, I thought Matthew would have mentioned that changing the share structure as is well that's probably is a short term thing that he's watching for, but sounds like he's more looking medium to long term. Anything to say about Wigton, Andre, before we move to David?
Truth be told, I think across the three of you guys,
Uh,
everything was discussed. But I think recent developments, Wigton is in fact on my watch list. Notable points would be changes to the share holder cap and the recent contracts that they would have gotten with at the airport. I guess things that I'd also note is the nature of the business. When the use of turbines, they probably incur a lot of, or they incur a lot of the depreciation charges, and as such, as those equipment are due or reach the end of their useful life, it requires a lot of cash in terms of getting new equipment. So I take note of that. I take note of also the volatility that can be associated with wind speed in terms of generating revenue. And I'm also just guided by the earnings performance. It would have probably displayed a little bit of volatility as it stands now. PE 30 times. I think
30.
it wasn't far. Yeah, I believe it wasn't far back when it was mostly at 10 times, and I'd have been wondering why it's such a trading at such a low PE. I guess at the time, sometimes what the market does is if the outlook for growth is limited, then that will be reflected in the PE. But
Yeah.
the reverse is also true.
Yeah.
So I guess just one thing. I mean, if the outlook for Wigton is, pretty much interesting. Earnings will have to keep pace. The short-term traders will become impatient, and you will see some selling pressures that could impact the long-term sellers. That could,
That's
exacerbate the selling pressures.
that's kind of what I'm expecting. To be honest, Andre, that because I'm watching to see how this upcoming milestone will fare for the stock. I feel like that same impatience that you mentioned, I think it'd be an interesting year for them. I do think that they'll get to or continue to see all-time highs from where they are right now. But it's very interesting to see what will happen after that milestone, what the trading will look like, because we have seen. I couldn't find a way to phrase it, but that impatient short-term trading is what I have been seeing and what I think we might see, but we'll see. I'm not a shareholder, I'll just say that, but I am watching it as well. So
Yeah, and then also things to watch, would be changes to the management team. I believe the current MD, is will be resigning shortly. So that's something to watch.
He retired already.
Yeah, man. I think he retired already end of March, right?
There you go.
Mm.